Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cinema Heroes. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jay Stu.
And today we are talking about Dune. Released in 2021, directed by Denis Villeneuve, written by John Spates and Denis Villeneuve and Eric Roth, based on the novel by Frank Herbert, and starring Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides, Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica, Oscar Isaac as Duke Leto Atreides, Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho, Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, Stephen McKinley Henderson as Thufir Hawat, Josh Brolin as Gurney Halleck, Javier Bardem as Stilgar, Sharon Duncan Brewster as Dr. Liette Kynes, Chang Chen as Dr. Yue, Dave Bautista as Rabban Harkonnen, David Dastmalchian, as Piter de Vries, Charlotte Rampling as the Reverend Mother Mohayim, and Zendaya as Cheney. A magnificent cast. I also just I love all the character names, so I felt like I had to say who they were. So Stu, I know both of us saw this movie.
Two of me?
Yes. Both of us saw this in the theater, but before I kind of dive into that, and I think I may have told this story in the podcast before, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but I wanted to give my experience with Dune, which is Dune is a book I had kind of always been aware of. I'd heard it's one of the greatest science fiction books of all time. And the only thing I knew about it was sandworms. That was it, And I knew it was written in like the 60s. And I had seen, working at Blockbuster, I'd seen the David Lynch movie on the shelf. And I'd even seen the sci-fi miniseries on the shelf. They never really, just based on the covers, nothing really did anything to make me want to rent it. And reading the book, I thought it was going to be, since it was written in the 60s, I thought it was going to be kind of boring, I guess. I don't know. I just was kind of not expecting it to be that great. But then when I found out that Denis Villeneuve was making a new version of Dune, I thought, well, maybe it's about time to read the book. 2020 happened. We were all stuck at home. And I thought, hey, this is the perfect time. I had the book on Kindle. I started reading it. At the very beginning, I didn't know what was going on. They're throwing out words like Gom Jabbar and Kwisatz Haderach, and I'm going, what is this book about? Then by the end of the book, I became Dune obsessed, and I love the book. I ended up buying it in hardcover and paperback, and then I tried to buy as much Dune stuff as I could get my hands on. I bought the 84 movie on Blu-ray. I bought the DVD version that has the extended cut, which David Lynch is disowned. I bought it on 4K even before I had a 4K player. Then I bought the sci-fi miniseries. Then I bought the sci-fi miniseries director's cut. And then I bought the sci-fi miniseries sequel, Children of Dune, which adapts the second and third book in the series. I also bought the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth book by Frank Herbert in paperback. And I bought the soundtracks to pretty much all of them. So I could not get enough Dune after I read the book. And so I was super excited for this film. Very disappointed when it got pushed back from October of 2020 to October of 2021. It took the Batman's original release date, but it was well worth the wait, in my opinion. It got released that's a word I could say. It got released simultaneously on HBO Max. And that's originally how I was going to watch it. I obviously wanted to see it in the theater, but but because my son was like a month old at the time, I knew going to the theater was difficult. So I tried to watch it at home. I only made it about 10 minutes into it before my son, I just couldn't hear the movie over my son. Mm-hmm. So my wife was nice enough. She was like, why don't you go see it in the theater? I'll watch Oliver. And then the next night we did the opposite. I stayed home and she went and saw it. And I'm really glad I got to see it in the theater. I wish I could have driven out to the Mall of Georgia and seen it in the IMAX, because I found out after the fact that there were IMAX sequences in this movie. But it is a movie that needed to be seen on the big screen. So anyway, I loved it. Thought it was an amazing adaptation. How did you have not read the book? So did you know anything going into the movie?
I went in completely blind.
Okay.
Almost completely blind. I knew of the book. I knew of the original David Lynch film and the miniseries, but I didn't know what it was about. All I knew was that old people loved it, and Star Wars took inspiration from it.
That's right. Yep.
Other than that, I didn't know anything, and when I heard Denis Villeneuve was remaking it or readapting it rather, I didn't feel any kind of ways about it. But that was until I saw the first trailer.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw the first trailer, I was like, I have to see this movie. And like you, I never had any interest in it. Like I would see the cover and see the poster and see it on scrolling on the TV guide back in the day, and I just
right
yeah. But when I saw this first trailer, I was like, I need to see this movie. Unfortunately, I did not see it in IMAX, but I did get a chance to see it in the theater, and it was amazing. I sat pretty much not the front row, but maybe like 4 or 5 rows back from the front row. So I had a fake IMAX experience.
Right.
But this movie is phenomenal. This is the type of science fiction I have longed for. This movie takes itself very seriously, although it is, it's the first movie of a hopefully trilogy, and there's quite a bit of exposition. It's done so in a way that doesn't make you feel stupid,
right,
and doesn't necessarily spoon feed you through the whole movie, although it is the first movie in a series. From the exposition standpoint, I have respect for it, but like just from the stylistic standpoint and the world building and just the character development of Paul Atreides, like this movie is phenomenal. I love this movie. It instantly became one of my favorite movies of all time.
Wow. That's awesome. It's kind of like you said, it had inspiration. It gave inspiration to George Lucas for Star Wars. It kind of has that classic hero's journey type story to it, but it is so good. The world building that Frank Herbert did is just phenomenal.
You can't build a world any better than this. It is so dense and well thought out and incredibly detailed down to the last, like the finest detail. It's such a well built world.
Yeah. Visually, when it was announced that Denis Villeneuve was going to direct it, I thought that's a perfect choice, especially after seeing Blade Runner 2049. Like it was just, I knew he was going to do a fantastic job. And like you, I could not wait to see footage of it, especially since I had read the book beforehand. And when that first trailer came out, it was like everything I wanted. And I was amazed to see some of there's some stuff in the book that I kind of thought would be
difficult to translate
or maybe like cheesy in a movie version.
Yeah.
And he put that all that stuff that I thought would maybe be kind of cheesy in a movie, he put in this movie and did it perfectly. The ornithopters, I remember when they were described in the book as
I love the ornithopters
looking kind of bug-like and stuff. I was like, I wonder how that, I don't think the other movies, I can't remember about the sci-fi miniseries, but I don't think, David Lynch made the ornithopters look like that. And Denis Villeneuve made them, they're just perfect in this. They're exactly as kind of how I pictured it in the book. The voice is something that I never thought would be adapted into the movie, just because but he, again, just did it perfect. Like, in the very beginning of the movie, Lady Jessica tells Paul to use the voice on her to give him the water. And when that scene happened, I saw it in the theater. I was like, oh my, he did it. I was like, and so I just was kind of amazed by some of the stuff that he was able to adapt and to adapt so well. This book was long considered unfilmable. And the 1984 movie, I like this movie. I did say, before we started recording, I did say compared to the 2021 version, this movie's not very good. But there's stuff that he did not adapt into this movie because it was hard. And also, I think the decision to split it up into 2 movies was very smart. It's such a dense book. There's so much in the book. that to try to fit it all into a 2.5 hour, maybe even a 3 hour movie would have just been very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was really, really smart. And I thought it was really brave of Denis Villeneuve to put part 1 in the very opening title shot, because, I mean, if this movie had not done well, we probably wouldn't have gotten part 2. And yet he was confident, I think, to say, you know what?
Yeah.
This is just part 1. We're only doing half the book.
Yeah, absolutely. He knew, like, and I think it's because he's such a fan of the book, and everybody that was involved is a fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, you know, his confidence didn't come out of nowhere.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
he knew what he was doing, and he knew that his team knew what they were doing. So he was like, this is definitely gonna get a sequel.
Right.
So we're just gonna proceed as normal. We're not even gonna think about the movie not doing well. So.
Right. And I'm really glad that it did do well, because Warner Brothers could have shot themselves in the foot, really, by releasing it on HBO Max simultaneously. I'm sure the movie didn't make as much money as it could have made because of that. But that was a decision for whatever, you know, all of the movies released in 2021 got a simultaneous HBO. They were trying to push HBO Max subscribers. And so I'm pretty sure that hurt the Suicide Squad.
It definitely did.
This movie, I don't know the exact box office numbers on this movie, but, you know, it did well enough to get a sequel, obviously. But I wonder if it would have, you know, had made that much more had it not been on HBO Max right away, same day that it was released in theaters. Let's talk about the cast. So I think, personally, the casting is perfect. We've got, first up, Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides. When announced, I thought, okay, that's perfect. The other problem that the previous adaptations have had is Paul Atreides is supposed to be like 15 years old, I think, in the book. And now, granted, Timothée Chalamet is not that young, but he has a very young look. He looks like he could play a teenager. Whereas Kyle MacLachlan in the David Lynch film and Alec Newman in the sci-fi film, they're adults. Like, it's obvious they're adults. And so that is one thing they got right in this movie. And Timothée Chalamet is also just an amazing actor. And so he holds this movie, or carries this movie, I should say, without a problem.
Mm-hmm. There were a few complaints about Timothée Chalamet's performance. Some people called it uninspired or wooden, and I beg to differ.
Yeah, I don't see that.
His demeanor in the movie is very stoic, and that comes from both of his parents. More so his father than his mother, because, you know, his mom has been a Jesuit, and she is in like constant conflict, and, you know, we later find out why. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that the way he portrays Paul Atreides is bad at all. I think he understood what kind of character this was. This is a guy he's young, he's very unsure of himself, and he is from two very well-respected and revered lineages. He has his Atreides side, where he's living in not only his father's shadow, but his grandfather's shadow. And then he has his Bene Gesserit side, where he has to live up to this prophecy. And it's I think that the way that he chose to portray that conflict between those two sides of himself, I think the creative choice that he made was the right one. He chose to keep it a little bit more subdued, and I think he's saving something for the sequels. Mm-hmm. He's going to be a lot more expressive in the sequels, and even towards the end of this movie, like, you could see him progress over the course of this movie. But I think in Dune Part 2 and hopefully Part 3, we're going to see, you know, all of those all of the complaints that a few people had. That's going to change in the future, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're going to be right, and I agree with you. I don't think that I never once thought his performance was wooden or uninspired. I thought exactly what you said. He's stoic. And that's from all of his training. That's from his lineage. That's from his, he knows he's the Duke's son. He has to act a certain way. But he's also, I only wrote one note for this movie. And that's, this movie does a fantastic job of showing us how much training Paul has done without like telling us. It's the perfect example of showing and not telling. Because we see him, fight training with Gurney Halleck. But also, there's a scene where he's about to see the Reverend Mother Mohiam, the Bene Gesserit, like top person.
I always thought that she was like Mother Superior of the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah, she's like the top Bene Gesserit because she works like directly with the Emperor. And Dr. Yue gives him like a little once over. And while he's doing that, Paul asks him a question and he answers in Mandarin, and Paul responds in Mandarin. So we that just tells us right there that he speaks Mandarin. And then directly after that, his mom signs to him, like, tell no one of this. And so then now we know he speaks sign language. And then and there's a few other examples that I'm not remembering at the moment, but like he has been trained in so much. And one of the things,
another example is when he's flying the ornithopter.
Right. Well, and that's a great, because when that happens later in the movie, it's so believable that he would know how to do that because they've set it up that he has been training and learning his entire life how to do all these types of things. So yeah, that was awesome. I want to say she's also been like training him in the voice and in like the Bene Gesserit ways and stuff like that. So he's just an extraordinary person. I don't think they touch on it in the movie, but in the book we even find out that he's training as a mentat, which is Thufir Hawat and Peter de Vries. They're mentats, and it's again something they don't really go into in the movie very much, but
they're basically human computers.
Yeah, some of the backstory in Dune is that like there was like a computer, kind of almost like the Terminator type thing. There was like a computer kind of uprising years and years ago, like maybe even hundreds of years ago, and because of that, the computers kind of got like wiped out, and now people don't trust computers anymore. And so now there are these human computers that do all they have to be trained, but they could do all this computing in their mind.
I thought that was so interesting. It's so cool because I didn't know that until after I saw the movie and I watched a YouTube video on like the world of Dune. I tried to learn as much as I could about the world without spoiling myself.
Right.
And I was like, yo, this is so, like, everything is so advanced and it's analog.
Right.
I was like, this is so dope.
Yeah. And I love the visualization of the mentats computing, like their eyes turn white, I thought that was so cool. And like I said, the movie doesn't really go into it, but I believe in the book he is also training on top of everything else to be a mentat as well. So we also know that Paul Atreides is just like incredibly smart.
It just goes back to what I said about they give you so much information without spoon feeding it to you.
Right.
They just assume that you're gonna get it.
Right.
They show you the entree and just assume that you're gonna know that it's steak and potatoes.
Right.
They're not telling you that it's steak and potatoes.
Right.
They just know that you're gonna know, and I love that. I wish more movies did that.
Yeah, and it's a great example too of that everything in there makes sense even without, like, you didn't necessarily know that the computers there was an uprising of computers hundreds of years ago. And that now there's these human computers. You just saw that these mentats were able to compute things in their minds. And for the people who've read the book, they're like, oh, it's a mentat doing his thing. And for people who haven't read the book, they're like, well, that's cool. That's a guy who can...
That's exactly what I thought.
Right,
I was like, okay, these guys are really smart.
Right. Yeah.
They can think really fast.
Yeah. So it's just, they did a fantastic job of giving you all the information you need without giving you too much information, but also letting fans of the book get to see some of that stuff. And so, I really, I can't speak highly enough of the way this movie was written. I am interested. I won't go so far to say concerned, because I do think Denis Villeneuve is a genius. But one of my favorite writers is a writer on this film, Eric Roth, and he is not credited on Dune Part 2. It's just John Spates and Denis Villeneuve. So I hope Part 2 is just as good as this movie.
As do I.
But Eric Roth is a fantastic writer, and I have no idea what he added or contributed to this film, but I hope not having him in part 2 does not hurt the film at all. Oscar Isaac as Duke Leto Atreides. Again, fantastic casting. Oscar Isaac is an amazing actor, and he plays the Duke Leto perfectly. There's like really no other way to say it.
He's one of my favorite characters in the movie, even though he's not in the movie too much. Again, you can see he is definitely or Paul is definitely his father's son for sure, because they have the same demeanor, they have the same characteristics. You know, both of them are, I wouldn't say soft spoken. I think Paul is more soft spoken than the Duke, but they have a certain like reverence about themselves and a certain amount of regality. They I don't know, like when Leto walks in a room, like he owns the room, but not you don't get the sense of a tyrant or somebody being,
people don't fear him.
People don't
respect him.
They have a healthy fear of him. They revere him without being afraid of him.
Right.
And I was like, man, that's just it. Oscar Isaac embodies that reverence.
Yes.
So perfectly.
One of my favorite moments in the movie with him is when they are saving the workers from the spice harvester. And at one point, somebody on the radio is like, we can't leave all this spice. And he's like, forget the spice. I just want to save the men. And it shows Dr. Liette Kynes kind of in the background. And she's like, what? You know, she kind of realizes like, this is the exact opposite of the Harkonnens who were here before. What we're used to. The Harkonnens would have said, forget all those guys, save the spice, you know? And so she's kind of taken aback by that. And so he's completely believable as somebody who could be a leader, who is also a kind person, but is also somebody who can take control. Like I said, a leader, I guess. Like when the attack on Paul happens with the Hunter Seeker and Thufir is offering to resign, and he's like, I don't care about your honor.
I don't care about your honor.
Yeah. And he's like, okay. You know, Oscar Isaac, again, was just the perfect choice to play Duke Leto. I think he did an amazing job.
And I love what they do. I mean, they did it in the book, but I love how they portrayed it in the movie. Like, Leto he's described as popular amongst the Empire.
Yeah, the Landsraad, yeah.
Yeah. So you think that he's being gifted
Arrakis
because he's just a good guy.
Right.
But that is later revealed to not necessarily be the case.
Right.
Like what is initially seen as a gift turns out to be a curse. And I thought that's amazing to me. I love how, getting into the Emperor a little bit, I love how we see glimpses of his jealousy without even seeing him.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
we already know what kind of guy the Emperor is, and we haven't even seen him or heard him or anything.
Yeah.
We just heard people referencing him. We already know what kind of guy he is.
I thought that was such an interesting choice to not even have the Emperor in there, which he's not needed in this half of the movie. And so to not see him at all, I thought was a really interesting choice. And but you're absolutely right. We know exactly what type of person he is. The Baron Harkonnen says the Emperor is a jealous man, and basically we get the impression that House Atreides is rising in power, and the Emperor can't have that.
Yeah, he can't have that.
And I like too how the Atreides know that it is not necessarily a gift. When Gurney Halleck shows up to fight Paul, you know, and Paul says he's not in the mood, he says something like, "You don't know the gravity of our situation," or something like that. Like, they know that this is not necessarily a good thing that's about to happen.
Yeah, it's very, very complex.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you said, Gurney says you don't know the gravity of the situation. And what he's saying is like that you don't want to have this necessarily, because the Harkonnens are gonna come after you,
Right?
And the House Atreides, they're gonna come after the House Atreides because the Emperor has given House Atreides Arrakis, but not everybody is in on it. You know what I'm saying? There are certain people that know what's going on, and not everybody does.
And we see that with Raban, which is Harkonnen's nephew. He's like, how can the Emperor do this? Give that planet to the Duke. And Piter is even like, don't consider it an act of love.
But the Baron, he's like, just cool it. Like, this is all under control.
Right.
I know exactly what is happening right now. Just stay cool.
It's under control.
And speaking of Baron Vladimir, Stellan Skarsgård is grotesquely intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
He is. I love the way that he is portrayed. He is 100% self-indulgent.
Yes.
And it's portrayed as being haunting. He is 100% a hedonist and is all about pleasure. And you can see how that has enveloped his, what's the word I'm looking for? Not kingdom, but his domain.
Yeah.
And it's, I love the look of Giedi Prime. It's all like this black industrial wasteland, but I don't know, like the way that Baron Vladimir is portrayed. He's so evil and he's so malevolent, but he's so just calm all the time. It's scary how calm he is all the time,
and I think that makes him even more frightening. So I read the book about 3 years ago. I'm not going to be able to compare it too much to the book because I just don't retain what I read that well, which is another reason why I want to reread it before the new movie comes out. But one change I know they made is all the Harkonnens are described as having red hair. And in this movie, I think they did a fantastic job aesthetically of changing that and making them just not just bald, but like hairless. They don't have eyebrows. They have just no
facial hair.
Yeah, no facial hair. And in the 84 movie and in the miniseries, I remember the Baron Harkonnen is portrayed as this really, it's the opposite of the way Stellan Skarsgård plays him. He's like very loud and boisterous and, he's kind of almost a mustache twirling type villain, I will have my way type of thing. And not doing that in this movie, I think was brilliant and makes him so much scarier.
Oh, yeah.
And so much more intimidating. And so, you have to have an actor with like gravitas to really pull that off. And so choosing Stellan Skarsgård to play him was a great choice. And even though he had to put on a whole bunch of makeup, because the Baron Harkonnen in the book, I think, is described as being so big that he literally can't even hold his own weight anymore, which is why he like floats around in that contraption or whatever, because he needs assistance basically with getting around. And so they, again, adapted that perfectly into this movie. And I love Dave Bautista as Robin, who I don't think he's in the book. I just don't really remember him in the book all that much. But I do remember him being portrayed as like this big kind of muscular beast. I mean, his nickname is Beast. So he's like, he's this big hulking kind of character, and casting Dave Bautista is, the perfect choice.
Yeah. Rebecca Ferguson.
Yes.
Talk about Rebecca Ferguson.
Lady Jessica.
I'm a fan of Rebecca Ferguson.
Me too.
This is probably my second favorite role that she's played. I think my first is Rose the Hat in Doctor Sleep. She is phenomenal in Doctor Sleep.
Yeah, she's good in that. That's right.
This is definitely up there amongst my favorite roles, and she's really good. She is even more conflicted internally than Paul is, because it seems like she's constantly not living up to expectations when it comes to her Bene Gesserit heritage, because the Bene Gesserit mother superior, that's her mother, right?
I don't think it's well, unless they made it that way for this movie, I don't believe it's her actual mother in the book. I believe it's just like she's like a leader of the Bene Gesserit.
Okay,
but
I assumed that was her mother, and that was Paul's grandmother.
I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
Okay.
When I reread the book, I'll try to see if I got that impression, but I don't think so. But like I said, I could be wrong.
Well, not that it matters. She's very, very conflicted, and not it looks like she's a constant disappointment to the Bene Gesserit. She was supposed to have a daughter, and she had a son.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is the Bene Gesserit able to choose?
Yeah.
Who they can have, or the gender of their child?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, there's that.
And so that's what I was gonna say. You say like
she gave Leto a son.
Yes,
because that's what he wanted.
Correct. I was gonna say she's in kind of constant conflict between being loyal to the Bene Gesserit and the love she has for the Duke Leto, who's not even. They're not married. She's technically considered his concubine. And she was supposed to give him a daughter because they have been manipulating bloodlines for centuries, trying to bring about the Kwisatz Haderach, who's considered like the chosen one, basically
the messiah of this universe.
And Duke Leto wanted a son. He wanted an heir, and so her love for the Duke chose her to kind of not betray, but like disobey, I guess, the Bene Gesserit, and she produced a son. And so now there's question over whether or not he is the Kwisatz Haderach, but according to like the Mother Mohiam, she was not supposed to do it. So they're not necessarily, they don't necessarily believe that he's the Kwisatz Haderach.
I always interpreted it as that he is, but they don't want him to be.
Right. Well, he obviously kind of proves to be, and
yeah.
And you know, if I'm wrong, and the Reverend Mohiam is Jessica's mother, and she is Paul's grandmother, it's pretty harsh to like be willing to kill him, you know, to prove that he is able to control his impulses. You know, it's just that scene puts it into a different light if that is in fact her blood relative. You know.
Yeah, I always assumed that was her blood grandson, but she had so much disdain for him because he was a male and not a female.
Right. Yeah.
That she had no love for him.
Right. And the Bene Gesserit is a sisterhood. There are only female members of the Bene Gesserit. And so I think that's another thing that the Reverend Mother really dislikes, is that she has been training Paul in the Bene Gesserit ways. And like teaching him how to use the voice and things like that. And so those are things that are not meant to be taught to men. And I think that's another reason why like you said, she's kind of been, you know, disappointing the Bene Gesserit, because she's disobeying them, but she is loyal to them. Like I said, I think she's torn. She's kind of torn between her Bene Gesserit kind of rules and sisterhood and her love for the Duke. So yeah, she's a very interesting character, and I think Rebecca Ferguson plays her very well. One of the moments I love with her is that scene where Paul visits the Reverend Mohiam, and he has to put his hand in the box and experience the pain. And she's outside the door even before he puts his hand in the box. She looks like she's in agony.
And she
knows
terrified.
what's coming. Right. Yeah. And that's where we first hear the lines, "Fear is, I will not fear. Fear is the mind killer," which is a very, I had, before I started reading the book, I realized, I feel like I'd heard "Fear is the mind killer" somewhere. It was like that I recognized when I started reading the book. Another thing I recognized when I was reading the book is walk without rhythm and you won't attract the worm. which if you've ever heard the Fatboy Slim song "Weapon of Choice," which is one of my favorite music videos of all time, which is Christopher Walken like dancing throughout a hotel. There's a line in that song that says, "Walk without rhythm, and you won't attract the worm." And I never realized that was a Dune reference until I read the book. It kind of clicked.
Gurney.
Yes, Gurney Halleck.
Yeah, we got to talk about Gurney Halleck. You kind of already touched on the scene when they are
Fighting a little bit, training. Yeah.
Training a little bit. They're sparring pretty much.
Yeah.
We learn a lot about Gurney in that small scene. He's a no nonsense type person. He's basically Paul's mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Paul actually has a few mentors.
He's kind of got.
He's got Gurney and Duncan.
Yeah,
but Dunk is more
fear.
Oh yeah. But Dunk is more of a big brother.
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas Gurney is
a teacher.
The teacher, and he's the uncle that gives you tough love.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I love the way Josh Brolin plays him, and like you said, he's the best example of him being no nonsense is when they're waiting for the Herald of the Change. It's this big ceremony, basically telling him that they are getting the planet Arrakis.
Yeah.
And Leto says to Gurney, goes, "Smile, Gurney," and he goes, "I am smiling." And he's just stone faced, It's just, that's great.
And I love that. I love that sparring scene. He's like, Paul's like, I don't have time for this, man. I'm not in the mood. He was like, they not gonna care if you in the mood or not. Like they gonna come and kill you. You got to be ready. Yep. Don't stand with your back to the door. He's like I said, he's no nonsense. He is not up for the BS at all. And then when he finally, gets that out of Paul, and he said he has a great line to end that scene. He says, "I see you found the mood."
Yeah. Yeah, and we see how good of a fighter Paul is in that scene because he actually is able to, quote, kill Gurney, but Gurney gets him at the same time, so they're kind of on...
Join me in death.
Yes, exactly. We also find out later from Piter de Vries when he's recruiting the Sardaukar that... Because the Sardaukar is like, why do you need us? The Harkonnens have way more troops than the Atreides do. And Piter says, yes, but the Atreides troops have been trained by Duncan Idaho and Gurney Halleck. And so it is, Gurney and Duncan are like two of the greatest fighters. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's another reason that I think the Emperor put this in motion is because the Atreides army was also getting too strong. And so
you got a popular leader who actually treats people right. And then you got one of the greatest armies in the Empire gaining more power. The Emperor could not have that.
No, not at all. And so, speaking of Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa, just again, we see how good of a fighter he is. Oh, and going back to the training too, we are introduced to the shields, which we see throughout the film. And they look amazing in this movie. They look atrocious in the 84 film. And it's partially because computer effects were so new back then. It's they did what they could, but you will laugh when you see that scene in the 84 film. But the slow blade penetrates the shield, which I think, again, is just a genius thing that Frank Herbert came up with. So, like, if somebody comes at you fast with a blade, the shield is going to protect you, but if they come slow, you're going to be able to penetrate that shield. So you've got the fighting style is just, you've got to be deliberate and stuff. And so I love some of the visual moments in this where I had just seen one where Duncan is fighting some people and they shoot like a dart at him and it hits him in the shield, but doesn't quite penetrate because it's trying to get through the shield and he's able to knock it away before it can get through the shield. The same is not said for the Duke because he gets shot in the back. And so he's not able to swat away that dart before it's able to penetrate the shield and get him. But yeah, I love Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho. I think that was, again, just really good casting. I think he plays Duncan Idaho very well. He's got that big brother feel in the beginning of the film.
He balances out the two sides of Paul's mentorship. You got He's the good cop to Gertie's bad cop.
Right. And I love, and Paul is comfortable with both of his mentors. But I like how Duncan is able to kind of joke around with him. He's like, "Oh, you put on some muscle?" And he's like, "I did." And he's like, "No." The House Atreides is just very well fleshed out in this movie.
There's a moment, or rather, something that causes another moment in the movie that I love with Paul and Duncan. Paul wants to go with Duncan to
Duncan's going to Arrakis early.
To Arrakis,
yeah,
because before they go to Arrakis,
right?
And he wants to go with Duncan. He's like, "Nah, it's not such a good idea." And Paul's like, "Well, I keep having these dreams that you die. Maybe if I'm there with you, maybe you won't die if I come with you." And I love the fact that Duncan dies because Paul is there.
Yeah.
That is stuff like that I love.
Yeah. I thought about that when I was watching it again, because he does talk about, he's like, "I feel like if I was there, I could keep you from," he's like, one of my dreams is I saw you lying dead, and I feel like if I was there, I could keep that from happening or whatever. Mm-hmm. And later on in the movie, after the Harkonnens have started their trap against the Atreides, they reunite with Duncan, and then because they're there, and he's like trying to protect Paul and Jessica, the Sardaukar arrive, and Duncan has to fight them to let them escape. And so you're right, he dies basically because Paul is there. Yeah. Not if Paul had not been there, that probably wouldn't have happened. Although the Sardaukar could have, I guess, still killed Duncan at some point, but
yeah,
he goes down, he sacrifices himself basically so that Paul and Jessica can escape. Very heroically. And I also love that, like, you see him fall and you think that's it, and then, like, from a horror film, we see the Sardaukar, and in the foreground, Jason, Duncan Idaho stands back up he's got the knife in his back, and you're just like, oh. So good.
Yep. There's just so many people in this movie to talk about.
Yeah, I know. I feel like, and we've been recording for almost an hour, so I feel like we're running out of time. So
we are.
Let's just talk about maybe some of our favorite scenes.
There's definitely the sandworm scene.
Oh yeah, how do you feel about the sandworm? The design of the sandworm.
Love them. I love them. I love them. I love them. I love them. They look fantastic. And I love the fact that they are, like, on Arrakis, they're worshipped as gods. Like, that is I really love that. Yeah, Shai-Hulud. And I'm watching a scene now where it's devouring this spice harvester.
Yeah.
And it just looks amazing. They're just a force of nature.
Yeah. I really like how they look in this movie. When you first see it, when it devours that spice harvester, I couldn't help but think of the Sarlacc pit from Return of the Jedi, which I guess the original version, which I wouldn't be surprised probably was maybe inspired by
the
sandworms in Dune.
For that.
And so and then when we see it again, later on in the film, they look awesome. I think he did an amazing job with that. We can't not talk about Hans Zimmer's score.
Oh man, Hans Zimmer's score,
Academy Award winning score for this film.
I know this might be a hot take, and I think we discussed it before, but objectively, I think this is his best score.
Yeah, you've said that before, and
I know people love Man of Steel, and I love it too. For a while, that was my all-time favorite score. And even Interstellar, people go crazy for Interstellar. Like you hear
Inception,
Interstellar,
yeah,
you hear Interstellar more than anything because of TikTok and Instagram.
Right. Yeah,
like the cornfield chase is always on somebody's video.
Right.
But this score is just it's otherworldly. Like this score is its own sound. Yeah. This is one of the most unique scores I've ever heard, and it accompanies this movie so well. You cannot put any other music with this movie.
Right. So I've listened to the soundtrack at home, and I, it's not as, I guess, catchy, I guess you could say, as some of his other scores, like you said, Man of Steel, Inception, Interstellar, the Dark Knight movies, obviously. But watching this movie again, it stood out so much to me. It's just the perfect music for this movie. Mm-hmm. And I think Hans Zimmer is a huge Dune fan too, because he turned down Tenet to do this movie, and he turned down Oppenheimer to do Dune Part 2. Like, this was a passion project for him.
Yeah, he said he always wanted to work on a Dune movie. And
it's perfect. And I started listening to it again, and I looked it up. Hans Zimmer, number one, I think he should have won more Oscars than he has, but he's only won 2 Oscars: The Lion King and Dune.
That's crazy.
I know. But he's been nominated.
Not winning an Oscar for Interstellar.
I remember I had some friends who were upset that he did not win for Inception. Mm-hmm. He got beat by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross that year for The Social Network. Mm-hmm. And I love
Which is a great score.
It is a great score, but we're now 13 years later. I probably would choose Inception over The Social Network.
Oh yeah. I think I've only listened to Social Network score once all the way through.
It works in the movie very, very well. And I don't, it's a great score. Don't get me wrong. But if you have to compare the two, I probably would go with Inception. I think Inception is the better score. But
I think they got it because of the kind of movie it was.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I'm actually surprised Hans Zimmer was never, Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard were never nominated for The Dark Knight. Or The Dark Knight, right? Again, they just overlooked superhero movies back then, but he got nominated for Inception. He got nominated for Interstellar. He got nominated for Dunkirk, and then he got nominated for this movie and won. So, and very rightly so, I think. Do you think? So this is a podcast. Every now and again I get podcast ideas, even though I can't afford to have more than one podcast. I don't have the time or the money. But one of my ideas was to go back and watch, and this would be hard for the older films, but to go back and watch all of the Best Picture nominees from that year and decide if I think the movie that won was the one that deserved to win, or if it should have gone to another movie. And in 2021, this movie got nominated for Best Picture. It didn't win. It lost to Coda, which I just watched for the first time recently and is a very good movie. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it's better than this.
I've not seen Coda, so I can't comment on that.
It's more of it's a great drama with comedic moments. It's more of a Academy Award type film, but this movie just has everything. It's got an amazing acting, amazing direction, an amazing screenplay. It got nominated for screenplay. I don't think it got nominated for director, which is a shame. Production design, it's just got everything. Amazing score. I can't speak highly enough about this movie, I don't think.
And the crazy thing about it, when I first saw it, like, I was in disbelief of how good it was. I was like, there's no way that movie was that good.
Right.
And I had to think about it for a minute before, like, I gave my final thoughts on it. I was like, there's no doubt that I love the movie. Like, right. Sure. Of course I think it's amazing, but
objectively, is it that good? Right, yeah.
Yeah, like, do I think that it's near perfection? So I had to think about it and watch it a second time, because I watched it once in the theater and then once on HBO Max before the
physical release
4K came out.
Yeah.
And after watching it that second time and still letting it marinate, I'm like, yeah, this movie's nearly perfect. Like, yeah, this is it.
What's funny is I saw it in the theater and I loved it, but I think I gave it 4.5 stars on Letterboxd, and I remember thinking, like, it was really good. Not a perfect movie, but it was really good. And I had not rewatched it since I saw it in the theater. And so rewatching it this week for the podcast, I think I liked it even more this time around.
Oh yeah. This is the 7th time I've watched this movie.
Yeah. Well, I remember thinking, like, I am definitely going to rewatch this again before the second one comes out.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I found even more to love this time around. I appreciated the score more. We'll just, since we're almost at an hour, I'll just go right into it. For me, this is a 5-star movie.
Oh yeah. I'm
going to go on Letterboxd and change my score to 5 stars because this movie deserves it.
I mean, there's so much that we didn't talk about.
I know. We might have to do a Dune Part 2, Part 1, Part 2.
Because like I love, we touched on it a little bit. I love the set design and the costume design. Like my favorite thing about it is the ornithopters. I love
those are
the
so
ornithopters
cool.
And the sound design. I'm a special features nerd, so I was watching how they did the sound design, and everything is organic. Everything comes from a sound that already exists in real life. So
Nice.
They took like beetles and hummingbirds and stuff like that, and made that sound for the ornithopter. I was like, that's so cool. That's why the sound design is so good, because it sounds that we subconsciously already recognize, and not something that is, synthetically manufactured for this movie. It's a real sound. And
that's awesome.
Fantastic. And then the costume design it's distinct, but it's believable.
Yes. The still suits look amazing.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about the Fremen. We haven't talked about Stilgar or
we
Cheney.
didn't talk Cheney, yeah. I love the Fremen.
Yeah.
The Fremen are awesome. They're like these warrior nomads. Like they just they're so awesome.
And they live in these underground like caverns called Sieches. And Duncan Idaho befriends them and finds out that there were like 10,000 just in this one Siege alone that he has been to, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Sieches around Arrakis. And so Duke Leto realizes that there are millions of Fremen, and the Harkonnens only assumed that there were like 50,000. Yeah. And part of that is because they're really good at hiding, basically. Like the very beginning of the movie shows the Fremen popping up out of the sand and killing some Harkonnen oppressors. And we just learned that the Fremen, they are desert power, as Duke Leto talks about, and how Paul talks about. And I love the end of the film when he sees one of the Fremen riding a sandworm, and he says, desert power. Oh, it gets me so excited for the next movie.
It's like that. There are two moments in the movie that make me I send chills throughout my body. When House Atreides is getting ready to leave the planet and leave Caladan.
Yes.
And go to Arrakis. That montage is fantastic.
With the music and everything.
Oh, I love that music. I love the way it's shot. I love Paul walking along the beach and just the ship coming out of the water. Oh my God. That and the end that we were just talking about when he sees one of the Fremen riding the sandworm, and combine that with the score and the conversation that he and Cheney are having. Oh, it's such a fantastic final moment for the movie. Oh my God. It like that got me so excited for Dune Part 2. I was like, I cannot wait to see where this goes.
Yeah.
Which is the reason why I don't want to read the book before I see Part 2, because I feel like this is how it was meant to be experienced.
Yeah.
And I don't want to taint that by reading the book. I know that the book came first and that's the source material, but I want to experience this world for the first time, just like I did for this movie. I want to do that for the second movie, and hopefully I'm praying that we get a third movie.
So I have a question for you. Since you have not read the book, does this movie feel like an incomplete story?
Absolutely not.
Okay, no. So it feels self-contained, and
it feels. I understand why people feel that way, because most movies end on a big plot moment. This movie does not do that. It ends on a character moment.
Right.
And also there's no, it's like a Transformers movie. There's no epilogue.
Right.
Yeah, there's no tying up of loose ends.
Right.
And they left those ends loose for the sequel, but the main continuity, which is Paul's journey from boy to man, is complete. and now he was a boy that became a man, and now in the sequel he's a man that's going to become the Messiah. And
Right.
like that is I love it. I love it. 5 out of 5. If I
5
didn't
out
say
of 5,
that,
yeah.
If I didn't say that already, 5 out of 5.
I can't wait for part 2. I think I am going to reread the book before part 2 comes out. I was planning on doing it anyway, and now that the movie's been pushed back to March, I have a little more time, so I probably will reread it. I'll watch this movie probably at least once more before the next movie comes out, maybe twice. So yeah, I can't wait. We'll definitely have to do an episode on part 2 when it's released.
Mm-hmm.
The only last thing I wanted to say is Jameis, the actor that plays Jameis, who fights Paul. He's one of the Fremen. That actor plays Dr. Mbenga on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and he's really good.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But yeah, I love this movie. I'm
sorry, but I
ahead.
love how they portrayed him.
Uh-huh.
Like we see him and we see Paul and him, I guess, talking, but it's not yet revealed that he's going to kill him. Paul is going to kill him. So yeah. I love how they did this. Is that in the book? Like, is he like seeing him as a premonition?
I can't remember, to be honest with you. When I reread it, I'll let you know. But as of right now, I don't really remember.
Okay.
But I do like how, and it is in the book, I do like how Paul keeps asking Jameis to yield, and the Fremen are like offended by that, basically. And at one point I think Stilgar says, it's like, is he toying with him? Like, they think he's being like needlessly cruel.
Yeah.
And Jessica's like, no, he's never killed anybody. He's never killed anybody before, you know? And so, I like that. That whole scene is awesome. And like you said, the way the movie ends, like Zendaya is barely in this movie, but she's obviously going to have a much bigger role. Same with Stilgar in the next movie. So yeah, I cannot wait for part 2. This is a fantastic, I don't feel like this movie feels somewhat incomplete to me just because I have read the book, but character arc wise, like you said, it does not feel incomplete.
Right. And
I think they chose a great place to cut it in half, basically, to end on. And I cannot wait for the rest of the story. So, and it's going to be, Christopher Walken is playing the Emperor, which I think is amazing. So yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Yes, sir.
Well, we'd love to know what you think about Dune. You can always let us know at cinemaheroes.com. You can also tweet at us or comment on our Instagram. Both handles are at cinemaheroes. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment down below what you think about the movie or anything else that you feel free, want to comment on. And if you are watching on YouTube, give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you, however you want to reach out to us. I think that about wraps it up for this episode, though. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm Jay Stu.
As always, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing.